Yeah, as far as I know. Don't. That's what. Yeah. So what I usually do is I'll go up there and I'll talk like I was presenting or something like that, and then he'll ask, "Oh, look, I'm Katie right now." They'll tell me like, "No, it needs to be louder" or whatever, and then that's where you go in.
And I think they're going to take turns coming up and speaking like around the front here. So you might have to move it a little bit.
Oh well,
They're not
it's
going to
not.
just do front.
The thing about web, it's going to be hard
I know
to.
you can't follow, but I'm just saying 90% of their speech is not going to be that long.
Oh well, we just need audio. I mean, we don't really need to like follow them around unless they're writing something or there's something on the screen. But they're not gonna. The screen's big enough. You might be able to be okay with it. Let's keep it. Hold on a minute. Sorry. Someone stand with the presenter will be yeah, be a little loud, but I'm not sure yet. Can you do me a favor and just stand up like where they're going to be presenting and just.
So it's where she's sitting right now at the computer. The speaker's going to be there. And then they're going to take turns standing.
Oh, well, I need someone to talk.
Oh.
To talk for the audio. Just talk normally. If he can hear you, then it'll be fine. It might be too loud. I don't know. All right. Maybe do an announcement. I mean, Could you do me a really favorite announcement?
It's easier to see whether what's really are because all it's doing is look at yeah, 80, 70. And Holly and I have yeah.
Okay, I was waiting till you're back.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So, yeah. Okay, guys, I'm going to go ahead and get started here so we can get going and make some announcements first, like I'll be doing every week. We'll be in this room for the rest of the summer. That was just that one last time because of the long session. Feel free to get up and get more food as we go. If you feel like there's not quite enough food, it's only because we had some people not pre-register. It's really important that we know by 11 the day before. That's when we make our food. What's it called? Like whatever order. Sorry. Okay, the bathrooms I think are out by the lockers. If you just go out there, if you guys need those. And let's see, I have a few things up here you guys might have seen. We're trying to start this thing called the Pilly Saver. We recognize that $5,000 doesn't go super far. I had $3,500 when I did it, but $5,000 is hard to live on in the summer in Chicago. We're trying to reach out to lots of different organizations, local and chain restaurants and places, things for activities, things for you guys to do. We've had little success, so we're going to keep trying. A couple things we did get was like 1 billion of these Jamba Juice dollar offs. They say that they're expired, but they're not. They said they will honor them. So feel free to say that's kind of janky, but anyway. The other one is Divvy Bikes. If you guys aren't aware, that's the ride share, the blue bikes that you see all around town. They started last year. They're $75 for an annual membership to it, where you can just hop on the bike for half an hour wherever you're at. They've offered $20 off. If you guys want to do that for the year, you have a special code that's on the piece of paper up here, or you can give me an email and I'll send you the information on how to do that as well. So those are the two. I'm continuing to look for other resources for you guys too. Let's see. I want to just put a plug in for next Wednesday is the what do we call it? A View from the Bench panel and group discussion. It's going to be a little hard because we're having some breakout groups in here, so just kind of be flexible with space as much as we can with breakout groups. But we have joining us the Honorable Patricia Banks, Honorable Edmund E. Chang, who's a former Pulling Fellow, and Honorable Maureen Connors. So we'll have 3 folks here who will be really happy to talk to you guys more in depth from their perspective. So please RSVP for that one. And then we've also added a social event to the schedule for Tuesday, July 1st, a Movies in the Park at Grant Park. I'm just going to have like a big sign up and some blankets, and you guys can feel free to bring some blankets. It's a picnic, you can bring whatever you want with you. And the movie starts at 6:30. It's Top Gun. It's at Grant Park. So that could be fun. You can bring, it's not just exclusively for Pilly interns, but any legal interns here this summer. Feel free to bring them along. You can find out more about that on our website. So I want to offer again, if there's anybody who wants to stand up and just give a real brief kind of explanation of something they've done this week or so far this summer that they want to share that they're kind of excited about. I've had several people say that they're happy to be spotlighted on Facebook. This is an opportunity to do it here amongst your peers. So if there's something that can be cool to share, this is a chance. Oh, great. I was going to introduce you anyway.
Hi, I'm Ashley. I'm a Philly intern, and you know, Chicago public schools are closing a lot of schools around the city, and we work with educational rights for students who are low income and homeless. So yesterday we were given a list of about 40 students whose high school closed. It's called Success. Or sorry, no, Success is Cowan Charter High School. So we've been able to reach a lot of the families, and we're able to send them information like preschool information. We're able to try to maybe get the kids to better in the schools. We're helping with fee waivers, so we've had a few success stories of students in better schools.
Thank you. That's a great segue, because Ashley is one of the Philly interns with the group that we have here today. So I want to welcome Patricia, Beth, and Graham from the Law Project, the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless. Patricia is the Associate Director of the Law Project, Beth is the Youth Futures Attorney, and Graham is an Equal Justice Fellow working with youth. And then we have 3 of their interns here, if you guys want to raise your hands. You guys can talk to them more too if you want to this summer about some of the work that they're doing, like Ashley just shared. So I'll have them tell you guys a little bit more about the coalition, the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless, and we'll have some time for questions at the end. So thank you guys.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having us today. It's great to be here and to share some information about our work. But I was just telling my colleagues, coming into this building is a little scary for me because I went to DePaul, graduated from here, and I still get sort of a stressed out feeling stepping into the elevator, even though it's been a number of years. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless. We're a unique organization because we're a community-based organization that has a law project, as opposed to many of the organizations that you work with are probably just legal organizations. So that gives us a lot of opportunities to kind of do more than a traditional legal services office. And the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless was founded in 1980, and since that time we've had a very clear mission, which is that we organize and advocate to prevent and end homelessness because we believe that housing is a human right in a just society. So that's sort of the mission that the organization as a whole works toward. And the Law Project itself is one of several projects. We also have an organizing department, and the organizers really are out in the community, in shelters, on the street, working with people directly impacted by homelessness. We have a policy department that works a lot at the city and state level to advocate for policy solutions. So we spend a lot of time in Springfield and in city council working on solutions. And then the Law Project provides direct services to individuals and families that are homeless or at risk of homelessness. And we're the only legal services project in the state that's dedicated to serving that population who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. We provide free civil legal services in a variety of areas, including access to school, shelter, housing, jobs, or services. We have 4 attorneys, including Graham, who's our most recent addition as an Equal Justice Works Fellow. We also have an intake specialist, and as you heard, a number of interns this summer. And we really do a lot of our work is focused on education issues for children and youth who are homeless, and we'll talk in more detail about that today. In the last fiscal year, 97% of our cases were for clients who are homeless, students, or youth. And I'm going to turn it over to Beth to give you a little bit more information about what homelessness looks like in Chicago.
Hi, thank you all for having us here today. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about homelessness here in Chicago and Illinois and then nationwide. It's a huge issue, obviously. And we've seen the numbers of homeless folks here in the city and nationwide grow really exponentially in the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years. So an analysis that organization did in 2013 found that over 116,000 individuals in Chicago experienced homelessness during the 2012-2013 school year. That includes not only individuals who are staying in shelters or on the streets or in cars, but it also includes individuals who are what we refer to as doubling up or sharing the housing of other people due to economic hardship or loss of their own housing. We really feel that those people, it's important to include those individuals who are doubling up in the number and think about them as being included in the homeless population because it really better reflects the issue and the problems with finding stable housing for low-income people in Illinois and in Chicago. Out of the 116,042 individuals that are homeless, about 9.2%, or 10,719, are unaccompanied homeless youth. So youth 14 to 24 years old who are experiencing homelessness without a parent or guardian. Again, Patricia said we focus a lot of our work on the educational rights of homeless children and youth. And this past school year in Illinois, there were 54,892 identified homeless students in the state. This is a 109% increase from the 2008-2009 school year. We've seen this number increase every single year. So this is, again, a growing problem. We're seeing more and more families experiencing homelessness statewide. In Chicago, as of May of this year, there were 21,482 identified homeless students in CPS. And again, this is a 120% increase between 2003 and 2013. And of those 21,000 students, 2,508 were unaccompanied homeless youth. So again, young people experiencing homelessness without a parent or guardian. But if you compare the CPS number to the statewide number, you can see that the majority of students who are experiencing homelessness here in the state are actually outside of the city of Chicago. So this is not just a problem here in Chicago, but this is a problem statewide. We see and serve homeless families not only in urban areas, but in rural areas as well. It really touches every community from the collar counties all the way downstate. And I want to talk a little bit about homeless youth. Nationally, approximately 550,000 youth 21 and under experience homelessness in the U.S. each year. These are unaccompanied youth, so youth experiencing homelessness without a parent or guardian on their own. 380,000 of them are under the age of 18, are minors, and so that kind of adds additional challenges and barriers for these young people to receive services. Approximately 20% of the homeless youth population here in Chicago, in Illinois, and nationwide identifies as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or genderqueer questioning. And so I'll talk a little bit about more of that later, but that's important to know that the LGBTQ population, our LGBT youth are overrepresented in the homeless youth population overall. And of this 550,000 young people who are experiencing homelessness on their own annually nationwide, only 50,000 receive services. There's a 90% service gap. And that is very true here in Illinois and in Chicago, and I'll talk more about that later. And really the last time we did a comprehensive study about the number of homeless youth in Illinois we found was in 2005. It's very, very difficult to count homeless young people. And the last time UIC and CCH did a study, we found that there was 25,000 unaccompanied homeless youth in Illinois. And just to, again, give you a sense of the problems of being able to serve these young people and stabilize these young people. Right now in Illinois, we have about approximately 550 beds. So again, there's a huge service gap. We wanted to give you just, before we get more into the nuts and bolts of our work, we wanted to give you a little show you a little video about what it's like to be homeless here in Chicago. And we're going to show you a trailer for a feature-length documentary called The Home Stretch, which is going to premiere here in Chicago in September of this year. This is a documentary that follows the lives of 3 unaccompanied homeless young people here in Chicago. I think it really reflects kind of their struggles and who they are as people, and some of the issues that they face just personally, and that the issues that we all deal with in terms of trying to serve these young people. So I'm going to start this video now.
It was because of the way that I am, that my mother, like, got rid of me. Because, I'm a lesbian. Like, the first 2 weeks, I was sleeping on the street, literally, like in a park or a police station.
Immigration. They were looking for me back. He had to settle down by himself somewhere else. And I had to settle down by myself in a different place.
I've been homeless for a while now, since I was like 14. Born in several thousand, DCFS, which some abuse, some sexual, some mental. You lose faith and you lose hope. And sometimes we go down the wrong path and we never get to see the light.
We have 6 freshmen, 8 sophomores, 4 juniors, and 11 seniors. Each name represents a story, and it represents a person who is going to be awesome someday. So, that's the list.
Is there anybody who has any something tonight here? Because we're gonna do a lot and everybody's not gonna be able to get in. We're only allowed to house 20 people, and I mean, it sucks because it's raining tonight, and as staff, you really don't want to turn anybody away.
Darian,
That was 18, 2 more.
Asia.
I just feel that we misplaced. We trying to find our own home. We trying to build ourselves as an independent person. I get stuck, like I get stuck and don't know what to do.
Mr. Rivera introduced me to Shakespeare, which was like life-changing for me. The acting gave me like the opportunity to show them that I was like more than a bad kid.
Like, I've been working on finishing my GED, but I was looking for something more stable. I got a son. I'm trying to get my life situated, so I can be there for him.
I was in the first meeting when they came in, and I asked the question, so what are your strengths? What are you good at? And when they say, I don't know, nothing. Nobody's ever taught me I was good at anything. I'm good at failing. Really? Well, you're good at communicating. You have a beautiful smile. Like, just finding something for them to hold on to in the moment, because you're not the piece of shit you feel like right now.
How you gonna change it? How you gonna make your story better? How you gonna write the next chapter of your life?
That's a little bit of a tough act to follow, hearing directly from those youth and how homelessness has impacted their lives. And I really encourage everyone to keep an eye out for this documentary, which I think will be coming someplace in Chicago in September.
The Cisco Film Center in Chicago in September 2014.
Okay. So, so I want to touch briefly on we're going to touch briefly and quickly on a couple of substantive areas we work in. And it's more just to give you an overview, and if you're at your PILI agencies for the summer or further in your career, that you are at least aware to know that these are potential issues, especially people who work with families and young people. I really encourage you to ask about housing, ask about schooling, because one of the reasons we feel this is so important is because if kids are able to finish high school and possibly go on to college, they have a good chance of being economically self-sufficient as adults. So there are really important protections for kids that are homeless in school. And there's a federal law and a state law, the federal McKinney-Vento Act, and this year is the 20th anniversary of our state law, which is the Illinois Education for Homeless Children Act. And there's also good state policy and city policy, and there's a lot of good tools that are primarily aimed at getting kids enrolled in school without any barriers and keeping them in school. So one important thing, and Beth touched on this a little bit, there's a definition in the federal law of who a homeless child is, and it's much broader than what many of us think of when we think of homelessness, but it's very important because kids in all of these categories are very unstable in their living situation. And people who know about school, oftentimes your choice of school is linked to where you're actually living. So if you're moving from place to place to place, shelter to doubled up situation, back to shelter, and if you had to change schools each time you changed your temporary living situation, you would have many different school changes in the course of 1 year. And that has been shown with lots of academic research to be very harmful to learning and development. So importantly, this definition includes children who are sharing the housing of others due to economic hardship, loss of housing, or similar reason, as well as people in shelters, on the street, in hotels, motels. That's a very common scenario in some of the suburban and downstate areas where there might not be sufficient shelter, but people can pay for a night or two or a week at a hotel or a motel. Cars, parks, public spaces, or places that are not ordinarily used as a sleeping accommodation. And then unaccompanied youth are an important part of the population. They're youth that are not in the physical custody of a parent or guardian, and many of the youth profiles fit into that category, and they face special barriers and need special attention. So basically, and quickly, we do some, half-day trainings on educational rights of homeless students. So I'll just touch on the high points, but one of the most important things is that students have a right to immediate enrollment. And as we often, when we're working with schools, tell schools, the dictionary definition of immediate is now. It's not come back next week, come back at the start of next semester, get your paperwork from your old school and bring it. It's that moment, and it doesn't matter if you don't have, if the child or family doesn't have proof of residency, proof of immunization, previous school records. None of that matters. The idea is get kids into school, and enrollment is also defined as attending classes and participating fully in school activities. So we've had some cases around athletic participation, and that's part of the participation in school activities, part of immediate enrollment. If you're in a homeless situation, you have a choice of schools. You can go to the school closest to where you're actually living, but you also have the right to school stability by attending what's called your school of origin, which can be the school that you lived in, or the school you attended before you were homeless, or the school that you just previously attended. If you're going back to your school of origin, you're entitled to transportation in order to get there. All homeless students are categorically eligible for free school meals and also fee waivers. Many people don't realize that even public schools charge significant amounts of money in school fees, textbook fees, locker fees, sports fees, graduation fees. If you're in a homeless situation, and actually if you're a low-income child eligible for free breakfast, free lunch, you don't have to pay those fees. And you can't be barred from participating in any school activity because of an inability to pay. And we just had a whole spate the last maybe 6 weeks or so of kids who owed fees that should have been waived, and they were being barred from participating in graduation or attending prom. So we have some materials in the back that explains that, and feel free to bring that back to your agencies. And if anyone feels like they're at an agency that could use more about the fee waivers or the educational rights, we can give you more. Schools should also be referring families to community resources and removing any barrier. The law is designed to remove any barrier to the enrollment, attendance, or success in school of a homeless student. So now I want to talk a lot on a different area, civil rights. So we have an important new tool in Illinois as of August of 2013, and that's the Illinois Bill of Rights for the Homeless Act. So we're very excited about it. People who are particularly living on the street face a lot of discrimination and harassment, issues with police interaction, and we really are excited about this law and think that it can help a lot. So basically the intent of the law is that no person should be subject to unfair discrimination based on his or her housing status. And then there's very specific rights around being the right to employment, voting, medical care, to access all of those things without discrimination, privacy rights, and then two things we really think are important is one is the right to use and move freely in public spaces without discrimination, and the right to reasonable expectation in privacy in his or her personal property to the same extent as personal property in a permanent residence. So just a point that we're trying to use this right now, we're working on a case where a lot of people on the street are getting their property taken by the city, either the police or the Department of Streets and Sanitation, to come through these areas and do a sweep of people and tell them to go someplace else and remove their property. And that raises Fourth Amendment rights and other concerns, but we're working on a case to incorporate a supplemental claim using the Illinois Bill of Rights. So, and we're looking at a couple of other things involving, right now, working with a suburban library who is denying library cards to people who are in the shelter because they can't prove their residences. An individual who is charged with criminal trespass and working with their public defender to make them aware of this law and possibly use it as a defense. We're also working with a national network. There's 2 other states who have passed a Bill of Rights for the homeless, and a number of other states are working towards passage. So we're working with national groups to use this the best we can. So the other thing to keep in mind about civil rights is we have a Cook County Human Rights Ordinance that prohibits discrimination based on housing status. We have fair housing laws. We often see housing discrimination as a barrier to people getting housed, and we've had a case where someone was fired when they lost their housing, and we were able to file a case in Cook County under the Human Rights Ordinance. Another civil rights issue that comes up often is zoning restrictions for programs like the one featured in the home stretch. The Crib is a program operated by the Knight Ministry that's called a low threshold shelter for youth. It's basically just a place to sleep at night. But that organization and a number of youth drop-in centers face a lot of community opposition, NIMBYism, not in my backyard, and they all require special use permits from the city and face a lot of difficulty in getting them. And we think the Bill of Rights could be a tool to help them through that zoning process as well, so.
There we go. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the specific legal challenges that unaccompanied homeless youth face. As was said previously in the introduction, I manage a program called the Youth Futures Mobile Legal Clinic. It's a legal program that provides representation and advocacy to unaccompanied homeless youth, so youth living without their parent or guardian, throughout the city of Chicago. We do this through targeted outreach at different housing programs, drop-in centers, schools, and different youth-serving organizations. So we really base this on a kind of a community lawyering model. We don't really ever try to make our clients come to us. We really try to come to them and to provide legal services in ways that would meet their needs, because they would have, you know, specific challenges possibly to receiving access to our services otherwise. But as Patricia had said, these unaccompanied homeless youth are a particularly vulnerable population and face some really specific challenges. One of them being legal barriers for minors or youth under the age of 18 to accessing services or housing. As you all probably may know, that the age of majority here in Illinois is 18 years old. You know, so any young people entering into any minor under the age of 18 entering into a contract, that contract is voidable under Illinois law, and so this prohibits minors from signing leases. Shelters that operate for families or for adults cannot legally house a minor under the age of 18 because they cannot consent to their own housing. They face a lot of barriers as well to accessing things like public benefits, you know, really, really crucial programs that provide really basic needs. So, you know, a lot of these young people face some huge obstacles in just getting their really, really basic needs like food and housing met. A lot of these young people also, you know, 18 and under, face the fear of DCFS and police involvement. A lot of young people think that it's illegal to run away from home or to be outside of the home without your parent or guardian consent. A lot of them are afraid that they're going to be locked up into juvenile detention or into jail if they turn themselves into a police or, you know, go to law enforcement or another mandated reporter to seek assistance. And so this keeps a lot of young people from really reaching out to try to access critical services like food and shelter. Again, I mentioned before, but LGBTQ youth have a really specific needs and face very specific challenges. They experience higher rates of physical and sexual assault, higher rates of mental health issues, and are twice as likely to attempt suicide. And again, they are overrepresented in the homeless youth population. We also have here in Illinois and in Chicago a lack of age-appropriate services. I mentioned that as well. We only have 550 beds to serve a population that we believe is approximately 25,000 youth. Many of the programs, the program featured in the Homestretch video that we showed you, Teen Living Programs, operates a transitional housing program. They run a waiting list of young people, waiting list for their housing program of 6 months to a year. So, you know, a lot of these youth are in a very acute crisis situation, but even if they want to access housing services, even if they want to access, you know, other programs, they are not able to do it because there's not enough resources to meet the need. There's a big issue with safety and sensitivity in the adult shelter system. Again, because there's not enough age-appropriate beds for young people. A lot of these young people are having to go to shelters and programs that serve adults. Many young people, especially LGBTQ young people, report being harassed, sexually assaulted in these different shelter programs, so that can be a big concern as well. And really the homeless delivery system, and I would say just, you know, the kind of social safety net in general here in Chicago and Illinois is designed for adults and families. It's not specifically designed to meet the needs of young people. They have different help-seeking behaviors and they have different needs. And so sometimes it can be kind of trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, and it can be very difficult. Some of the legal issues, I just want to really go through some legal issues that we see when we're serving these young people through the Youth Futures program. Graham's going to talk a little bit more about some of them in general. Patricia talked about our education work and the educational rights of homeless children and youth. We also serve a lot of young people in special education matters and school discipline matters as well. That especially comes into play with our older young people. We can also help them advocate to access to re-enrolling in school. Criminal law issues are a big issue for homeless young people. They have a lot of interactions with law enforcement given their instability and their housing status. We see a lot of them reporting harassment by the police. And then a lot of them end up with criminal records, whether they be juvenile or adult. And then so sealing and expunging can be very, very important for a lot of these young people. A lot of them have arrests for minor things like trespassing, minor theft, whatnot. And sometimes they don't understand that these are things that stay on their criminal record, even if they're not prosecuted or convicted. And they can get in the way of both housing and employment. So this is a big issue for them. As well as tickets and fines. You can be issued tickets for doing various things on the CTA, including sleeping on the trains. And so we see a lot of young people getting fines that can interfere with their credit and other things as well. So that's a big issue for homeless youth. Employment, again, especially when it comes down to criminal records, stealing and expunging, employment can mean the difference for stable housing for these young people. So it's important for them to be able to access jobs. Healthcare, Graham is going to talk about that, so I'm not going to. Access to public benefits is huge. A lot of times these young people cannot get into housing programs due to the lack of beds, but if they can get access to TANF or food stamps, it can mean a huge difference. It can be difficult though when you're staying at different addresses. If your mom is collecting food stamps for you, but she kicked you out of the house, that can prevent you from getting it. So they have a unique challenges in terms of accessing government benefits that maybe other folks don't necessarily have. Sex and labor trafficking is a big deal with youth. These young people are much more likely to be victimized while they're on the street in one way or another. A lot of young people report, trading sex for food or for a place to stay or for money, and are involved in the street economy in one way or another in order to survive. Family law is a big issue. A lot of these young people are pregnant and or parenting. I would say almost 50%, if not more. One of the young men in the video report, he mentioned having a child, trying to get things together for his child. So guardianship, child support, child custody, paternity are all relevant and things that we work with our young people a lot on. Immigration, again, is something you see a lot. There's a lot of undocumented, unaccompanied young people who, once they turn 18, are struggling to access resources, shelter, and services. Domestic violence can be a big issue and a reason that a lot of young people become homeless, and this can also be an issue within the LGBTQ community. I kind of already mentioned LGBTQ issues. Patricia talked about discrimination. Access to identification documents is huge. It's huge to access. It's a key to accessing public benefits. It's a key to accessing employment, and it can be a key to accessing housing. But when you're a young person and your mom or dad kicks you out and you don't have anything, it can be really hard to start from scratch, to get your birth certificates or your social security card and your state ID, and that's a huge thing that we help young people with, because it can seem insurmountable to them when they really have nothing to begin with. We help people with housing issues, minors accessing housing, housing discrimination, and then just making sure resources are available. And then we see a lot of young people with consumer credit and tax issues. We see parents illegally using social security cards once they kicked a kid out. Kids dependency status being sold. You name it, we see a lot of strange things. I feel like it's never a dull moment. I've been doing this for 7 years, and you still see some new things every time. So it's really fulfilling, and it's really interesting work as well. So now Graham's going to talk a little bit more about healthcare and medical rights.
Hi guys, so go back 1 second. See, with all of these challenges and legal issues, that being homeless youth is essentially a full-time job. Every day there's constant immediate needs that need to be met that aren't. You saw in the video, it's kind of one of the most striking parts of that video, I thought, when the two are talking when they don't get into the crib saying, where are you going to sleep tonight? So that's sort of the world in which homeless youth are working on, living in. Immediate needs are very complex, they're very hard to manage. And so it should come as no surprise that homeless youth face enormous health risks from living on the street and dealing with that kind of stress and trauma on a day-to-day basis. So I just want to throw a couple statistics at you that give you kind of a sense of where homeless youth are in terms of their health. So homeless youth suffer from serious mental illness at a rate of 19 to about 50%. That's kind of the range of the where studies have seen where they're at, as opposed to 4 to 9% with housed youth. About 48% of homeless youth have attempted suicide. 74% have had problems with serious drug use, as opposed to roughly 20% with younger youth. 48% have reported serious alcohol abuse problems, as opposed to about 50% of housed youth. Health risks that touched on these: serious mental health issues, substance abuse, sexual health issues, and violence. Violence is huge. A study from Florida said that about 66% of homeless youth have either directly experienced violence or witnessed it. And from that comes a lot of serious issues with post-traumatic stress disorder. So I want to talk a little bit about access to healthcare and some of the unique barriers that homeless youth face in trying to access health insurance, and how the Affordable Care Act, which significant portions of it just rolled out in January of this year, are creating kind of enormous opportunities for homeless youth to give them. Obtaining health insurance, there's basically 4 types of health insurance that a homeless youth can have. Medicaid, which is government health insurance for low-income persons. New kind of Obamacare marketplace insurance, which is for a little bit higher income people. That's private health insurance that's subsidized by the federal government. Employer health insurance for those youth that are working, and access to parent health insurance. In our experience, Medicaid is by far the #1 program that gives unaccompanied youth access. And what's unique about this program is that before the Affordable Care Act, in order to get health insurance through Medicaid, be low income, but you also had to be either a child, a parent, elderly, or disabled. So homeless youth that were over the age of 19, which is Medicaid's age of majority, had no access to health insurance, which means their only access to health care were ad hoc, charity-type clinics, FQHCs, which are federally funded clinics that have a limited scope of services. So of all these health issues I described, there was not really a good way to access services to get those issues treated under control in any kind of systemic way. So on January 1st, 2014, the state of Illinois expanded Medicaid to every single adult who was low income, who wasn't already in one of those other categories. So the vast majority of single low income adults, which is a major homeless youth are in that category, now have access to health insurance. But it's not quite that simple. There are major barriers to getting access to that program. So the state of Illinois and any other state that's expanded Medicaid absolutely swamped with applications for Medicaid. So from October to April, the state of Illinois had 750,000 applications for Medicaid. In the month of March alone, 290,000. And as of April 1st, they've only processed 250,000 applications. of those 750. So what I see in practice is that youth that applied for Medicaid in December haven't even heard back yet on their application. And so that in and of itself becomes a major barrier to accessing Medicaid. If you applied in December using the mailing address of a shelter or some sort of apartment that you're staying in unstably, by the time you hear back in April, you're already long gone, so you don't get your medical card. They ask you for some sort of supporting documents, you can't send it back because you don't even know they're asking for it. And if youth is lucky enough to get access to Medicaid, there's something wonderful that came out of the SMART Act, which is the Illinois Redetermination Project. So this is a new initiative in the state to determine who is defrauding Medicaid and redetermining their eligibility. Now, so again, they will send out a letter to your last known mailing address and saying, send us all of your verification documents, your social security number, your ID, your proof of income. All of these documents that we've already discussed that are very hard for homeless youth to gain access to. If you don't send it back, you get kicked off. But again, if it's an old mailing address, you never get that letter to begin with. So another statistic for you, 50 of the first 50,000 of these letters to go out, 50% of the people that got those letters were kicked off. 80% of those were just because people didn't return mail. So there's a ton of youth that are cycling out of the Medicaid program and losing their access to the health. But now for something that's kind of a little bit of a good news. So managed care in Illinois, the way healthcare has usually always been funded and has created the incentives for how the healthcare system works is on a fee-for-service model, which means a healthcare provider gets paid for every service they provide, regardless of outcome. So that's created a very inefficient healthcare system that doesn't really meet the complex needs of difficult populations like homeless youth because they utilize a lot of care, but there's no one who has the financial incentive to make sure that they're getting the most appropriate care. So the state of Illinois is rolling out a transition from that fee-for-service model to providing care into a outcomes-based payment model, which is having a massive effect on the healthcare market in Illinois. But what I think is most exciting is it's providing an incentive for healthcare providers to start addressing some of these complex needs like access to housing, access to various social services and case management, and providing new kinds of care that might be able to meet these. One issue that I haven't talked about yet is consent to healthcare. So for minors, again, the age of majority is 18. The law presumes that you need to be over the age of 18 in order to consent to a variety of different things. One of them is another being access to healthcare. This is something that we've been working on this spring, and actually we were able to pass a law that gave unaccompanied minors the right to consent to their own basic healthcare services. This has always been a major problem, and that bill doesn't solve the whole problem. There's still existing law that limits the type of services that homeless minors can. These are some other issues that face homeless youth, specifically medical records. Continuity of care is really important for anybody who has health needs, is having a doctor who knows your health history, who's aware of what your issues are. Homeless youth are traveling in different parts of the city, having seen different providers. Their provider might not necessarily know what their issues are and won't have necessarily the medical records to get a sense of what that these issues are. Charity care and medical debt is a massive issue. So it's great that insurance was expanded to low-income adults this year, but many homeless youth, I see a lot of them, are between the ages of 22, 24. They've been going in and out of hospitals for years without any insurance and have racked up unbelievably large medical bills. Some I've seen, they don't even know, they estimate into like close to $10,000. That's a major issue, and charity care programs exist at various different hospitals, and there's a lot of federal rules around that require hospitals and healthcare providers to forgive a lot of that debt. But again, you have to ask for it. It's not going to happen automatically. Disability is huge, so I gave you that number, about 19 to 50% of homeless youth suffer severe mental illness. A lot of youth need to access disability insurance, which especially get additional services as well as maybe monthly payments to help you with housing. Yeah, and so I talked a lot about this, so I'm not going to go into it again, but mental health and substance abuse is a major issue. In addition to expanding access to health insurance, The Affordable Care Act made it mandatory that healthcare plans cover mental health and substance abuse services, which wasn't required before. So I want to talk a little bit about the Equal Justice Works Fellowship and just postgraduate fellowships in general, because I know that's something you guys are really interested in.
Get into the Equal Justice Works Center about being removed from care. Is there a waiting period after, during which, apply? So for example, through the redetermination project, if you're purged off of the program, is there a waiting list that you have to wait before you reapply?
There's no penalty, but once you're out, you have to reapply. You have to start the whole process over again. And so, first of all, you have to know that you got kicked off the rolls. You might not know until you go to the doctor and they say you don't have Medicaid anymore. We can't certify again and go through that potentially months-long process. Yeah, there's no penalty like that, but in fact, it creates a very so postgraduate fellowship. So I'm the Equal Justice Works Fellow. I was an intern, like our interns, after my 1L year. And what the Equal Justice Works Fellowship is, and a lot of other fellowships too, is where you, usually at the end of your second year, you develop a project. So you approach an organization, like I approached the Chicago Coalition, identify something new that can augment the work that's already being done at that organization. So the Coalition for Homeless has always been interested in healthcare. They've worked on charity care, public benefits. It's part of what their work is, but there was never a full-time person focusing on healthcare issues for homeless youth. And so through the Equal Justice Works program, it's a 2-year fellowship. It's funded by private corporate funding that the Equal Justice Works program matches the funder and the host organization. And it's really a great way to get into public interest work. It's a chance to really be creative and think and pinpoint a need that might not be being met, that's something you're interested in, and work with an organization to develop a project and get that kind of initial Skadden is another one. So Equal Justice Works and Skadden are the kind of the 2 largest postgraduate. I know Philly has a summer program for it's going into people that are going into private law firms. They spend their summer. But yeah, I can answer a lot of questions about Equal Justice Works and postgraduate fellowships.
I was wondering how you did you do research at with other fellowships to see what was already being done, or how did you go about knowing what things like that?
So it was 2 things, and I think this is something for you guys to be thinking about after your current placements, is you're being exposed to a whole new world of not only legal practice, but also the issues that your clients face, and to be actively thinking about what it is that could be done at this organization that would be really helpful, but also thinking about the area of law that you're interested in and kind of learning more and seeing where that's going to be going in the future. So for example, the Coalition for the Homeless, I was thinking, because I knew a little bit about this Medicaid expansion that's coming down the line, my thought was, how is this going to affect homeless youth? What's going to be happening in a couple of years when Medicaid expands to this population? And so I went to Loyola Law School and I focused very heavily on healthcare law. And so I connected those 2 things that I was focusing on, homelessness at the Coalition and in my healthcare practice, and seeing where there could be a connection between those 2.
In terms of the healthcare, so for the charity programs that cover the debt that's owed, you said that they have to ask for that. Is that like a requirement in the state of Illinois only? Because I know I'm from Ohio, and where I'm from, I know that there are counselors from the hospitals who will come and talk to you, and I don't know if that's basically just because it's the hospital that it is. It's a Catholic-based hospital, and they have their own program that they do, but I would think that advocating for that and having counselors to actually go in and speak to people who qualify based on their income or based on their status of not having a home would be much more beneficial to the population.
And Beth, you can speak to this too, but I do know that charity care is governed by federal law. At least recently, it's been really more robust under the Affordable Care Act. So there are federal blanket laws. From what I understand, they need to make people aware of charity care programs. So they have to advertise it. They have to give people the chance and exposure to the program, but it's still something that you apply for on your own.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not as familiar, I guess, with the changes that have gone on, maybe since the Affordable Care Act, but I know historically in Illinois, it's really been governed by Illinois law, 2 different state statutes, and they do require notice, but it's kind of been an ongoing issue with certain hospitals to really enforce it. I know hospitals here in Illinois have lost their tax exempt status by the IRS because of their not really properly implementing the program under the law. Different, hospitals have also been sued, basically for lack of implementation as well. And one of the big things is creating barriers and not providing adequate notice to people about, financial assistance programs. And it can be complicated as well because it's hospital fees. So when you have a doctor that might provide you services within the hospital that might not necessarily be covered. So it's a complicated program.
It's extremely complicated, and a lot of the problems arise from what counts as charity care. But one of the ways Provena was the Illinois Supreme Court about this, and one thing that hospitals were doing that they got in trouble for was the sticker price that a hospital would charge for something. If you have health insurance, private health insurance, you get a discount because of being in that insurance. What they were doing was charging people the sticker price because they didn't have health insurance, and reducing that by a little bit and saying, we just gave you $20,000 of charity care, even though you're still being charged more than somebody with health insurance would be charged. There's a lot of kind of stuff like that going on. It's not a perfect program, it helps, but it's still difficult to medical, that's still a huge problem for people.
It's kind of an overwhelming situation on this. I was wondering if you guys could each, if you're interested, give an example of an individual case or policy or something that you did that you feel like as a lawyer you really was positively impacted.
I guess I'll start because I'm standing here. I had a client, so I've talked a lot about how difficult it is or how long it takes to get health insurance. I had a client who had severe frostbite from exposure and really needed healthcare immediately. They needed access to kind of expensive prescriptions, a lot of full scope service that they needed right now. And because they had no health insurance, there was nobody that was going to see the way he could afford those prescriptions. And so I discovered through this process that you could apply for Medicaid over the phone. And for whatever reason, that was working a lot quicker. And also contacting people at DHS and really advocating and explaining my client's needs and saying they need their application decided upon now, not 3 months from now. And I was successful, I was able to get him access to healthcare through this kind of advocacy. And after this happened, I started working with a lot of different legal service providers and people that are interested in access to healthcare, and really explaining the importance of applying by the phone and raising awareness of how much this delay in application processing is having real.
I kind of touched on this in my remarks, but at the beginning of last school year, we were contacted by a family in a suburban high school district, and it was a family who basically had taken in their son's friend who wasn't able to live at home. And they had done that before, and without really realizing that that constituted a homeless situation, ran into problems with their school, and their school said the grandmother that the child had been living with was no longer in their district, so the student couldn't stay. That was wrong, but he transferred to a private school and got some financial aid. They couldn't sustain that, so they were trying to re-enroll in the public school, and we were able to help him re-enroll. Then even after getting him re-enrolled as a homeless student, then he wanted to play football, and he was very talented, and they basically were refusing to let him play. And as I mentioned, this point about enrollment includes full participation in school activities. So we actually filed a dispute under the homeless education laws saying he should be immediately enrolled and allowed to participate. And it got very complicated because it involved the Illinois High School Athletic Association and eligibility rules and transfer rules and all of this other stuff. But we were saying that doesn't really matter. He needs to be immediately enrolled. So he was able to play. He missed a little bit at the very beginning of the season, and he ended up getting an athletic scholarship to Indiana University. So I actually just talked to him a couple of days ago, and he's already at Indiana starting like some football stuff and some summer school stuff. So he's, off to college, and really, I mean, he would say if he didn't have that scholarship opportunity, he wouldn't be able to go to college. Do you wanna-
Yeah, I mean, just really briefly, I met a young 16-year-old at a high school here in Chicago. About 9 months prior, she's the parent of about a 2-year-old child. About 9 months prior, her dad kicked her out of the house, and because he kicked her out, she lost custody of her child. The father kept her baby and said, "You can't live here anymore." And she didn't have anywhere to go with her child. And then he filed for permanent guardianship of the child. So I represented her in probate court. And the judge eventually awarded her full custody of the child. And then, but it still didn't solve her housing problem, her lack of housing for her and her baby. And so then we advocated with DCFS to take her in as a ward, not the child, but her as a ward. And she became a member of the Hill versus Erickson class. We managed a consent decree against DCFS representing pregnant and parenting wards. And so she was able to get housing and a lot of additional resources and supports through DCFS, which it enabled her to really maintain custody of her child, and she'll be entitled to the supports until she's 21.
So we're happy to answer any more questions that people have, but I just wanted to let people know there's a lot of different ways, either now or in the future, if anyone's interested in becoming more involved in CCH. We have some upcoming events, and we left some flyers about them. We have this Saturday, we have a benefit concert at Hope Fest at the Park West, featuring the old 97s. And then next week at Loyola Law School, we operate a scholarship program where we are awarding 5 new scholarships to students who were homeless in high school and going on to college. And that event is free, and I think it's one of our more inspiring events. So anyone could come to that. There's some flyers about that. We're also always, having internships or externships, and that's a good way to get involved. And as you move on in your career, we work with a lot of pro bono attorneys. So we have all our emails on here, and that's on your PowerPoint. So we're happy to stick around and answer questions, but we encourage you to get involved. Thank you.